Today, I wanted to share some novels that were written about the days of pandemic. So there are a lot of novels that has been written, and it might also be a very interesting read for most of you who are under present lockdown with another pandemic. It also gives us the experiences that we are undergoing through is not something new to humanity. Already a lot of our forefathers have undergone these type of pandemics, and they have undergone these type of issues without much of communication. Today we have a lot of progress of communication, and we can keep in touch with society through the communication system or media, but that wasn't there. So when the earlier pandemics had occurred, so we'll begin with Daniel Defoe's book on a journal of the bubonic plague. So he writes about a journal of the plague year, in which he captures an entire year of how the plague has affected the human society. So his novel is, and it is a journalistic report, it is not a fiction part of it. He talks about the bubonic plague being first reported in 1664. There are rumors that Holland is having bubonic plague, and within the month of December, there is also a suspected death in London due to this bubonic plague. And by the month of March, there is rise in death of people, and by July month of it, at that part of the time, the government uh, is going to have a lockdown of entire London city, where all the commercial establishments, taverns, yales, and common dining places, they are all shut down. But the people of that place, they are all taken in by surprise, and also their negligence has proves it to be very very tough during the lockdown, because they did not have provisions, and most of them had to venture out to meet the day-to-day requirement of food by looking out in search of provisions. This also resulted in the spread of disease in a very fast way. By the month of August and September, the death of people, as per Daniel Defoe, is more than many members of the families, whole families of the streets, they are all dead. So it takes up a very peak proportion, and he also talks about how there is a slow subsidizing of this disease on the onset of cold and frost conditions during the December. It's an entire 1 year that people are suffering. There are a lot of deaths and a large number of lockdown days that they had to face, even at that part of time, somewhere in the 1664 to 17th century. This is one uh, journal that it talks about. Daniel Defoe, you already know about him to be a very popular writer who has written about Robinson Crusoe, Stranded Sailor, and also about later is Man Friday, uh, who is a native of that place and helps him during his loneliness. So that is another novel. But anyway, this is one report. It is more of a report of facts that happened during this bubonic plague. The second book that I would like to suggest you to go through is the Camus novel, The Plague. It talks about the plague occurring in a place called Oran in Algeria, where it is shut down for a month as plague has killed huge number of people. So, as in every administration, the local leaders initially are in a denial mode when they receive the reports of thousands of rats dying on the streets suspiciously. They do not take it seriously and as a sign of plague. And later, this book also talks about the medical workers of that time, and even one of the medical professional. Then he quotes that, I do not ever know about what the future holds for me, but as of today, I am going to think about how to cure my patient. Even then, the medical professional heroism you can look into as we are seeing them today. So that is about his novel. Then the Spanish flu also had a huge number of deaths of nearly 50 million people, but it was less and it was overshadowed by the immediate World War One, and it did not receive the due uh, uh, what do you call it as notice as it would have had if it was in a normal time, because World War One caused much more havoc. Then the third novel that I would like to suggest you is Margaret Atwood's The Year of the Flood. So she talks, the flood here is similar to the biblical flood of Noah's Ark. So it is somewhat similar of that, but it is a waterless flood that she's talking about. She's talking about a flood caused by the microorganisms, where it destroys a large number of uh, human beings, and humanity is affected by this. So she talks in this novel about the extreme isolation that people take place. She talks about the protagonist Ren, a trapeze dancer who survives, and she writes her name. This protagonist writes her name over and over again in a book so that she doesn't forget her name, as she has no one to communicate with. Man is a social animal, and it's very difficult for him to be tied down at a place. Even as an early man, he was a nomad. This nomadic instincts and his social nature is very tough to be controlled by a lockdown or isolation. But for the betterment of ourselves, we have to overcome these urges that we have. So Ren, she talks about. So Ren has a flashback in this novel where Atwood uses this flashback to describe about how the corporates, for their ulterior motives, are responsible for the release of a dangerous pandemic microorganism that wipes out the entire society, human society, except for a few survivors. This is not a novel about good guy versus bad guy. It is a novel about humans coming together to fight a epidemic that is not human being. So here the enemy is not a human being; it is a pandemic microorganism. Lingma's there is another novel that I would like to talk about is Lingma's Severance. It explores a scenario of what happens after the pandemic fades away, with all the leaders and people having died, except for a few survivors. It talks about questions about who is going to take charge of rebuilding the community, a culture, who decides who should have a power, who sets the guidelines for religious practice among these survivors. So Jack Ma's Severance talks about these basic questions in a novel and how they cope up with that. So there is one more novel, Station 11, written by Emily St. John Mandels. So it is before, this novel talks about before, during, and after this contagion caused by the pandemic organism in the Republic of Georgia. This novel is about that, which wipes out 99% of human beings, and how the world is rebuilt after the virus. All these novels, when you read, there are many questions which arise within us. Who and what determines the art that we have? Does celebrity culture really matter to us? How will we rebuild the society after the pandemic nemesis that happens? So the future storytellers will decide how this pandemic will be described in their novels. So read these books during the pandemic, and it would surely help you with a lot of points for survival and prepare for the new world to emerge. These novels also help us to empathize with our forefathers who have undergone these issues. It is not that we are the first people to undergo these sort of issues. There are lockdowns for nearly 1 year during bubonic plague. It is required for our survival. So prevention is better than cure during this contagion. So now we are having this pandemic of coronavirus. So now there are only two things when uh, we all can come safely out of lockdown. As one, we should develop immunization or vaccination for this coronavirus. Second one is, even if they are infected, they should be able to treat with medications this coronavirus. Even if we don't develop immunization or vaccine methods, they should be able to treat this coronaviral diseases. So these are the things that future readers should prepare for. And in all these novels, what you can notice is each character has an equal chance to survive or not to survive, and they are all purely based on how they are going to respond to this uh, dire circumstances, how they are going to respond to this lockdown situations, and their foresightedness and forethought. So this is a very interesting set of books that you can all read through during this times of crisis and help us to hone ourselves better to face the future challenges that we have. And let us remember that we are not the first people to have such issues faced by us. History is again repeating itself. So if you have liked this video, subscribe to this channel and remember to press the bell icon to receive regular notifications. So I will be signing out from this video and would give due credits to my camera person, Master Aditya Ravi. Thank you.